None. I cannot say how much that I feel privileged to be here today as the speaker for this month. Anyway, just before today, I had a running battle with Nana and Patrick, or Igbo. When they approached me about 2 weeks ago to say that they felt I should be doing this today, and I resisted very, very strongly because I didn't think it was a good idea. But I honestly feel honored to be here, and I want to thank the leadership of NKATA and of course the Center for Memories, the joint organizers of the monthly dialogue series, for inviting me to lead the conversation for July. I'm flattered, and when I say that, I want you to take me seriously. I'm sounding like Trump. You know, each time he speaks, he says, believe me, believe me, believe me. But I'm really flattered to be inducted into this league of very distinguished sons and daughters of Igbo land who have had the privilege of standing here to share their views on a range of issues, some general in nature, and others more specific to certain development aspirations of Igbo in particular. The topic that I've been given to speak upon today, MAKA OGANIRU, the Igbo Renaissance and the leadership question, to my mind, is a subject that is general in nature. And there are, or you're going to find, as many perspectives on this issue as there are, the number of persons whose views you may seek on the matter. But broken down, this topic, to my mind, speaks to a crisis of leadership in Igbo land and the need for a renaissance in order for meaningful progress to take place. Let me say up front, however, that most of what I'm going to say today is not peculiar to is not peculiar to Igbo land. I believe it is going to apply to most parts of Igbo land, most parts of Nigeria, perhaps in varying degrees, because there is no denying the fact that there are crises of every nature in every part of our country today. No region has been spared the insecurity, the economic hardship, and the pervasive sense of foreboding and hopelessness amongst our populace. The business sector has not been spared, and no meaningful business and economic growth can take place in an atmosphere of insecurity. Without prejudice to the foregoing, however, I'd like to provide the following brief context based on my personal knowledge and understanding of the Igbo leadership question. The Igbo leadership question is characterized by a multiplicity of individuals, elected and unelected, who stake claim to Igbo leadership. The cacophony of voices that claim to speak for the Igbo, and the absence of consensus on issues of regional interest. At no time is this more pronounced as it is during election cycles, when there are contending political and pecuniary interests. The consequence of all of this is that the Igbo rarely coalesce around a common agenda, thereby weakening its negotiating position. Contending political groups take advantage of the region's political fragmentation, with personal interest, subsume regional interests, and the progress of the entire region is sacrificed. The region is then completely sidelined and treated like a pariah. Its people denied representative appointments and employment into sensitive national governance structure. It is left out of infrastructure development plans, while existing projects get little or no budgetary allocations, and has no limited, and consequently has no voice in the management of national affairs. We're all familiar with this situation, I believe, but how did we get here? How culpable are the managers of our public affairs, who have perfected the politics of what I call mutually assured destruction. Perhaps we remember the sudden romance between the members of the PDP and the APC a few months to the last elections. The Igbo political elite has perfected the art of extreme republicanism, seemingly unable to reach consensus on issues of common interest, with a national reputation for political mercantilism at the expense of group interest. And one of the most appalling manifestations, to my mind, of the crisis of leadership in Igbo land and disunity amongst its people is the cynicism and disrespect with which Ohaneze, the foremost sociocultural group in Igbo land, and its representatives are regarded. I'm unaware of any other sociocultural group that constantly face the kind of challenge that Chief Nyanwodo and his colleagues contend with daily, internally and externally. I'm not unaware of the often repeated dictum, na Igbo enweze, an attribute of our republican nature, but which to my mind has assumed extreme and fatalistic dimensions, given the heterogeneous nature of Nigeria and the context for political power and resources. There's no way that a house that is divided against itself can stand. It is my firm belief, therefore, that there is a nexus between the place and experience of the Igbo in Nigeria today and internal conflicts in our cultural, political, and economic socialization within Igbo land. I'm going to take the next few minutes to provide some perspective on leadership, given that it is essentially the fulcrum of our discourse today, and especially for the benefit of the younger members of our audience. Individuals in the front line or at the zenith of institutions are often referred to as leaders. And people who address them as such may be right, depending on the context within which the so-called leaders are addressed, as I will shortly clarify. I would like to state categorically that leadership is not a position. In other words, contrary to widely held beliefs, occupying a position at any level does not, at least it should not, make you a leader. At best, such a position may confer on you some authority to act and exercise certain powers, but it certainly does not make you a leader. The distinction must therefore be made that being in a position of authority and a position of leadership are two different things. However, a position of authority provides opportunity for you to exercise leadership. Any action, to my mind, by anyone in a position of authority, no matter the level, which does not bring some verifiable improvement in the human condition, to my mind, is not an act of leadership. At least it should not be regarded as one. Such an individual or individuals should neither be described or addressed as leaders. It therefore follows that anyone can be a leader by simply doing what a leader should do. It doesn't matter your station in life. It doesn't matter where you are or what you do, insofar as your action brings succor, improvement, and progress, albeit momentary. You are a leader in that moment in time. In other words, leadership is not static. It is dynamic. Therefore, if anyone aspires to be called a leader and to be addressed as one on an ongoing basis, such an individual must embrace a critical consciousness that enables him or her to commit their entire life to the service of the people at whatever level they may find themselves. Leadership and the exercise of it is not restricted to any profession. So musicians, mechanics, teachers, soldiers, policemen, comedians, bankers, civil servants, farmers, drivers, artisans, and a host of others, not mentioned all have opportunities to exercise leadership in the course of their duties and their daily life. This is consistent with the classical definition of leadership, which infers that a leader is someone who is able to direct, guide, and inspire a followership to a certain direction or consistent set of actions and or ends. Let me put on record that it is ignorant and self-deprecating when we recognize and appear to celebrate only the more prominent roles in public and private sectors as positions of leadership or authority, and fail to recognize that we're all leaders in our own right, as mothers, as fathers, as uncles, brothers, sisters, class monitors, gate men, cooks, cleaners, traffic wardens, including the agboro in the motor park. If you don't agree, just stop for a moment and contemplate what would happen, especially on a rainy night, for instance, if you arrived at your gate and your gate man was not there to open the gate for you. Upon a little reflection, perhaps you will see how these individuals improve your life's condition on an ongoing basis by simply helping you deal with mundane tasks. Mundane they are, but also very important. Martin Luther King, for instance, was not a bishop. He didn't hold any national office. He was simply a minister at the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Alabama. And yet, you couldn't tell the story of America and the fight for rights for blacks without talking about Martin Luther King. Mahatma Gandhi was not a national office holder, and yet he became a leader of millions by his clear determination to challenge and oppose British rule and to promote India's self-rule. A designation should therefore not define you, rather let your actions define you and your ability or otherwise as a leader, especially when you hold authority on behalf of the people at whatever level. Just as I was putting this together, I found a very comical perspective on leadership by James McGregor, author of the book titled Leadership, and I quote, "Many acts heralded or bemoaned as instances of leadership, acts of oratory, manipulation, sheer self-advancement, brute coercion are not such. Much of what commonly passes as leadership, conspicuous position taken without followers or follow-through, posturing on various political stages, manipulation without general purpose, or territorialism is no more leadership than the behavior of small boys marching in front of a parade who continue to strut along Main Street after the procession are turned towards the fairgrounds." End of quote. I found that very funny. Now, let's look at the state of affairs today and to try to see if there's a linkage between the present sorry state of our country, the entire country, and the quality of leadership. So in the light of the above submissions on leadership, can we identify a nexus between our country's poor human development indices, dilapidated state of national and subnational infrastructure, insecurity, secessionist agitations, corruption, unemployment, illiteracy, and poor educational and health outcomes, low industrialization, increased emigration, and failure of leadership and incapacity on the part of those in authority? And I find some very important examples across Africa as well. The position of Rwanda after the genocide of 1994 comes to mind. The country has no obvious natural resources, no access to the sea, a very small population, just about 12 million today. Hilly and inconvenient for agriculture or most other forms of large-scale economic activity. Yet, the emergence of President Paul Kagame has made all the difference. It's been a turning point, and by the clear vision, mobilization of the people, organization of the country, and effective actions consistent with its stated objectives, Rwanda now has one of the fastest growing economies in Africa and is now held up as an example of effective leadership, resulting in a marked improvement of the circumstances of a whole nation. And while we laud the results that are self-evident, we should consider the budget of Rwanda in 2012, for instance. At that time, the budget of Rwanda for the entire year was $220 million, compared to the total budget of five southeastern states during the same period, which approximated to about $382 million. Now, look at the population of Rwanda, roughly 10.5 million as at that time, and then compare with the approximate population of the southeast of Nigeria. And yet, when you look at the outcomes from the national budget of Rwanda during that period, you cannot, in good conscience, say that the southeast, the outcomes from the southeast, provides any significant comparison. Now, earlier, I spoke about the pervasive lamentations about the exclusion of Igbo in the management of the nation's affairs. And since NKATA Umibe encourages informed debate, I have taken liberty to obtain some information about Igbo representation at the federal level from 1999 to the present time to enable us reason together. Let us take a look at Southeastern representation in the armed forces, the paramilitary forces, including the Immigration and the Intelligence Services, the Senate, House of Representatives, since Nigeria's return to democracy. The armed forces. Between 2006 to 2008, Chief Marshal Paul Dike was Chief of Air Staff under President Obasanjo and briefly under President Yar'Adua. Between 2008 and 2010, Air Chief Marshal Paul Dike was the Chief of Defense Staff under Yar'Adua. And between 2010 and 2014, Lieutenant General Azubike Hejirika was Chief of Army Staff under President Jonathan. Under the paramilitary services, between the year 2000 and 2004, Lady U.C. Mwizu was Controller General of Immigration under Obasanjo. And between 2005 to 2010, Mr. Shukura Joseph Ude was Controller General of Immigration, also under President Obasanjo. From 2010 to 2013, Rose Chinyere Uzoma was Controller General of Immigration, now under Jonathan. For the police, Ogbonnaya Onovo was Inspector General of Police under Yar'Adua. And in 2009, Bernard Nwadialo was Controller General of Customs, just a few months because of his retirement age. For the intelligence services, Ambassador Uche Okeke was Director General of the Nigerian Intelligence Agency between 1999 to 2007. I go to the National Assembly. The Southeast has occupied the President of Senate position for 8 out of 19 years since the current republic, and has occupied the Deputy Senate President position for a total of 12 out of 19 years since the current republic, making the Southeast the longest serving of all the ethnic groups in either of these positions so far. For the benefit of the younger people, I know that history is no longer being taught in schools. It's been banned for decades now. But in 1999, for most parts of 1999, Evan Enwerem was President of Senate. Between 1999 and 2000, Dr. Chuba Okadibo was President of Senate. From 2000 to 2003, Chief Pino Saim was President. Then from 2000 to 2005, it was Adolphus Mwabara. And then from 2005 to 2007, it was Chief Ken Namani. And from 2007 to 20, for the Presidents of Senate. For the position of Deputy President of Senate, we had Chief Ike Kweremadu from 2007 to 2019, 12 years. And currently, we have Chief Ojus Okalo, 2019, just in the last couple of days, announced as the Chief Whip of the Senate. Let us look at the House of Representatives. Now, the Southeast has never occupied the position of the Federal House of Speaker, but it has occupied the Deputy Speaker position for 4 years, while it has occupied the Deputy Leader position exclusively since 1999. Exclusively since 1999. So, Deputy Speaker, 2011 to 2015, Emeki Hedioha. Deputy Leader of the Federal House. You had 1999 to 2003, you had Oho Abunwa Arukwe. 2003 to 2007, you had Gilbert Nnaji. Then 2015 to 2019, you had Chukwuma Onyema, but he was Deputy Minority Leader. And then from 2019 to date, I'm not aware that anyone has been, there's anybody from the Southeast. But for Chief Whip of the Federal House, between 2007 and 2011, we had Emeki Hedioha. He was Chief Whip of the House of Representatives. Now, ladies and gentlemen, having heard what I've just said, I'm curious to know if and how your views may have changed with regard to the claim or perception of marginalization and exclusion from mainstream governance. This information, as you can see, relates to representation in the armed and paramilitary services and the legislature. With respect to the judiciary, it is important to point out that the Honorable Justice Rosalyn Ukeje was Chief Judge of the Federal High Court. She was the first female and one of the longest serving in recent memory from 2001 to 2008. The Igbo have not had representation either as president or vice president since the advent of the current democracy. And I was yet to obtain data on executive appointments in parastatals and boards by presidents from 1999 to 2019, as at the time of this event, and therefore understand that the information I provide may not paint the whole story. But in the light of what is available, can we continue to claim exclusion in mainstream governance, taking cognizance that leadership emerges in the National Assembly, for instance, through majority political parties? And where the political party has spread as the PDP had in the period 1999 to 2007, it is easier to achieve representation, even with executive appointments. Let me, however, introduce a different dimension, which is really the main reason I actually sought this data. And it is the issue of the constitutional provision for the appointment of individual ministers from each state of the Federation. And it may be useful to examine the portfolios assigned to Southeast ministers during the past 20 years. So we've had the privilege of ministerial positions of Transport, Foreign Affairs, Chief Ojo Maduekwe, Chief Dubemo, Foreign Affairs, Ngozo Konjo-Iweala, Minister of Finance, Minister of Foreign Affairs, then Minister of Finance for about 7 years, Obi Ezekwesili in Education, Chukwuemeka Chikelu, Ambassador Thomas Aguiyi-Ironsi, Defense, Charles Ugu, Commerce and Industry. I'm going to spare you. But then we've had an Igbo as central bank governor. But taken holistically, there are three perspectives to the sets of information provided above. It is clear from the distribution of the appointments already in the military, especially in the military, that Presidents Obasanjo, Yar'Adua, and Jonathan, and the PDP demonstrated statesmanship and greater sensitivity to Nigeria's diversity by ensuring representation of Nigeria's various groups in the nation's governance structure. This should always be a consideration in order to give the nation's component groups a sense of inclusion and belonging. The other dimension is the quality of representation that we have had from representatives in these positions. And I invite you to take particular note that over an 8-year period from 1999 to 2007, Igbo had the position of Senate President exclusively, and this was the third highest ranking position in the country. Umunem, I urge you to, let's keep emotions aside. And I'd like to ask, what legacies can we point to as the outcomes of these years of representation at those levels? Taking another look at the ministerial portfolios. By all standards, some of these were prestigious and pivotal. And I ask, how did we deploy these representative opportunities? And so we had the yam, we had the knife. How much? What quantity did we cut for ourselves? And so, like Chinua Achebe said in the very first lines of his book, The Trouble with Nigeria, wherein he said, the problem with Nigeria is purely and squarely a failure of leadership. He said there's nothing basically wrong with the Nigerian character, there's nothing wrong with the climate or the air in Nigeria. It is simply a failure, the inability of its leadership to rise up to the challenge of leadership and to take responsibility of and provide personal example. And being mindful of the intense competition for resources and the geoethnic sensitivities in Nigeria, does the region have the moral authority to lament neglect and marginalization if its own representatives have been unable to meet its expectations? In any case, how have we fared in each of the states of the Southeast, in which there is homogeneity of culture, of language, norms, where our own people, our own governments have total control of its resources? How have we governed ourselves, and what is the poverty situation here? What is the state of our infrastructure? What is the state of our roads, our schools, our hospitals? How much planning goes on in these states? The foregoing notwithstanding, let me say without equivocation that the policy of exclusion of regions from strategic appointments for not voting for candidates of a particular party is dangerous. It is divisive. It is unstatesmanly. It is impolitic. It is undesirable. It is unhealthy. And it unhealthy for national cohesion and unity. Now, as I reflected on my presentation today, I recalled what may be a historical parallel to the current experience of the Igbo, and I seek your indulgence to share a brief history with you. Now, in 1999, there were two front runners as candidates. One was President Obasanjo of the People's Democratic Party, and the other person was Chief Olu Falai. Both of them were Yorubas. Though President Obasanjo won the elections, but the PDP lost each and every state in the Southwest. The PDP lost each and every state in the Southwest. And those states, 6 of them, were won by the Alliance for Democracy. And that was the situation until 2007, when the PDP won all but Lagos in the elections. You may also recall that between 1999 and 2007, in fact to 2007, the Alliance for Democracy and the Action Congress, they had a running battle with the federal government of Nigeria. They had a major running battle. They were left excluded from the budgeting. They were excluded from the planning. In fact, the funds of local governments were seized. For one thing or the other, they were seized. They were withheld for several years. And though the region's mainstream political elite remained in opposition during 1999 to 2015 when the PDP was in power at the center, they got more than their fair share. A strategy which the PDP had hoped would help them to really garner support. But what is the lesson here? The lesson for me is the principled tenacity of the Yoruba political class, their steadfast opposition to the ruling PDP, and the equanimity with which they bore their plight. But most importantly, their historic comeback in 2015 through the instrument of a strategic alliance with Northern Nigeria, positioning the region as a preferred political partner to the exclusion of the Southeast from mainstream governance at the federal level since 2015. It is clear from the foregoing that the fringe position of the Yorubas from 1999 to 2015 was based on choice. On choice. And they took responsibility for these choices. During the same period, the Igbo also made their own choices, and the consistency of these choices appear to suggest to my mind that it may be anchored on some deeply held egalitarian political principles. But as we can see, while one group had taken full responsibility for their own choices in accordance with Newtonian principles, the other appeared to want to eat their cake and have it. My personal position is that the Igbo must take full responsibility for the political choices that we have made. It is not in the culture of the Igbo man to salivate because of the aroma emanating from across the fence on food that is being cooked by your neighbor. It's not in our culture. It's totally alien to our culture. So, but what are the lessons? The additional lessons that the Igbo political class can learn from the Yoruba experience are cohesion, unity, and clarity of vision, patience, dignity, tenacity, mobilization, accommodation, but most importantly, contentment. That when you have made your choice, you must be content with that choice, whilst you continue to prepare for a comeback. They were in the political trenches for 16 years or so to speak, but they persevered, coming together when they needed to and disagreeing when they had to for the ultimate and overall benefit of their region. I cannot fail to point out the influence of Yoruba patriarchal system on the politics of the region and how they are able to deploy the expertise of their intelligentsia, the influence of their sociocultural groups made up of their elders who enjoy the recognition and consultative patronage of the political elite. Now, I'm going to talk to you next on what I consider to be the road to Igbo Renaissance. The way in which the Yorubas walked their way to political reckoning is not novel, as I would show in the later part of my presentation, but it suffices to say that it holds significant lessons for Igbo elite, the region's intelligentsia, and important sociocultural groups, which had played major roles in Igbo thought leadership and ascendancy in the past. So rather than bemoan under the weight of despondency that is pervasive in the Southeast today, the region must see its current political dilemma as a great opportunity for introspection and mobilization for the resurgence of Igbo thought leadership that will frame the challenges before us within Buhari's Nigeria and canvass strategic engagement options for survival under the prevailing circumstances. Igbo Renaissance will require a pan-Igbo effort involving the participation of all segments of our population. Political office does not necessarily confer wisdom, and I hold a strong view that co-opting the region's intelligentsia and socio-cultural groups, including faith institutions, to generate ideas, as well as act as sounding boards for public policy options, will have positive outcomes. What the Yoruba elite was able to demonstrate is that leadership is not always necessary to be exercised at an individual level. The key to Yoruba success has been the triumph of collective leadership, whereby individual members of the elites were able to, or motivated by their visions of enlightened collective self-interest, to subsume personal ambition or temptations for instant gratification for a much bigger price for their region, if patience and wisdom could be brought to their predicament. It is probably common knowledge to some of you that in addition to all of these things, even whilst they were in the trenches, the Yoruba elite proceeded to actually formalize a development structure called the Development Agency Agenda for Western Nigeria, the Dawn Commission, where they actually came together and have built consensus on the development aspirations and the strategies for really taking the Southwest forward. If we must achieve this Igbo Renaissance, it will be critical that we leverage our history as builders and as innovators. So I'd like to proceed by saying that there can be an Igbo Renaissance. In order for this to happen, however, we must embark on a journey of cultural rediscovery and leverage our history as builders and innovators. We must return to first principles to interrogate and rediscover our identity. Who are we? What are we known for? What factors have converged to erode our identity and cultural values in the way that they have become eroded today? How and why have we come from the positions of leadership and preeminence in academia, in science, in medicine, in history, politics, that our forebears earned by merit to the positions of underdogs? Despised, humiliated, we're literally begging for our lives. Literally. We seem apologetic about everything. But ladies and gentlemen, Igbos are courageous people. Igbos are warriors. Igbos are resilient people. Above all, the Igbo are a people steeped in their veneration of justice. We believe that actions have consequences and that leadership imposes on the leader the obligation to rule, guide, and influence the people justly, courageously, and with visible results in improvement of the well-being of our society. Our history is replete with acts of heroism by our forebears as they fought for their dignity at various times.